Right. So hey, everyone. The first thing that I should be saying is that I have really no idea what I'm doing here. I mean, this is a tech conference, right? And I'm not exactly like those super smart expert 10Xers that have spoken before me. So I'm going to limit myself to speaking a little about my own story, because I know more about that than any of you. And I will try and avoid tricky questions that way. So before I start, I should really thank everybody that put this together. This was a lot of work, and I know that, and also the companies that backed the event, and all of you for going a night of heavy drinking yesterday to be here today and listen to me. Right, so I have this friend back from university. He's a very, very smart and dedicated guy, right? So while we were studying, I kind of just tried to pass the exams and have a lot of fun. But this guy, he really went after the whys. He's one of the smartest people that I ever met. And he saved my ass quite a few times when I was, time was tight and I was busy with freshmen, and he helped me out a lot. And today, this guy lives a great life. I mean, he's abroad in an improbable city. He's a freelancer and works only a few hours every day. He's free and happy and makes enough money to pay for whatever he wants. The thing is, he gets questioned all the time. His family, a lot of his friends, don't really understand why he doesn't work for Google or for Facebook or for a company whose name they know. They don't understand. They think he's wasting his life by just doing what he does. And that's normal. That's understandable that people think that way. We're very much trained to believe that there's one path and one way to go about our lives, and that's not necessarily true. When you're little, people ask you what you want to be when you grow up. I really, well, Okay, there we go. So I really like this cartoon. I wanna point that word out over there. It's give, not grow. It took me about 2 minutes to understand why this was funny. And I think that the question, like, people ask you what you want to be when you grow up, right? And there's this may sound innocent, but there's an expected line of answers to this. There's an accepted line of answers. And when you're 6, you say, I want to be an astronaut. That's cool. Well, when you're 16, you better say that you want to be a doctor or you want to be a lawyer. That's kind of what people want to hear from a person who's 16-year-old. Like, dreaming is for children, right? And you better not get into the arts. So I think that this question is a dangerous one, because even though it's innocent, it kind of primes a whole younger generation to believe that they are what they choose as their job. Like, you're supposed to kind of, you grow up, you study and work hard to learn a trade or a skill or a set of them. You get a partner, preferably heterosexual, you get married, and then you have children, and you save up for retirement in 40 years and do the same thing over and over again. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad path. I don't want to use words like good or bad or right or wrong when I'm talking about other people's choice of life. That is absolutely valid. The problem is, I think we're heavily biasing our children to believe that there's one true path, and that's the path with a career. And just a second. And I think that's wrong. Now, we go from saying like an astronaut, whoa, how cute, right, to an astronaut. You think you're better than us. Who the hell are you? Like, go to school, learn something relevant, right? And being born in Portugal doesn't really help. For all its recent evolution, we remain a country where eccentricity is not rewarded. Quite the contrary, actually. Like, we mock those who are different from us. This is hilarious, right? And it's all fun that we laugh at it, but it's really hard to be this guy. Because if this is what you want to be, then you're going to get hate all the time. That's not cool. Like, if you don't conform, you can't live a happy life. You can't be recognized by others. And we're a people with low self-esteem, maybe because of the dictatorship that we had until such recently. I don't know. But the fact is that we've got a lot going for us as a people, as a country. We're taking forever to realize that. We don't believe in ourselves. We don't encourage people to be different. And the consequence of that is that entrepreneurship suffers, and it suffers hard. My friend, he frequently undercharges his clients. He comes from a country where he would have to fight for a job, but he's so good that clients fight over him now. And he goes like, shit, 100 euros an hour. How is that even fair? I know people back home that they don't even make 7. what the hell is that? And he feels guilty, and it doesn't help that we associate money with greed, with perversion, with corruption. We go like stupid rich people, you know? They probably got there by screwing with us. That's kind of what we have in our heads. Someone should have explained to him that that was okay. I try to do that all the time, but it takes time. As far as my story goes, doing things differently was really not a choice, was kind of just like what happened to me, and I followed along. And I had a ton of fun, so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about that. And like doing things slightly differently isn't really hard or difficult. It's just kind of you do it and it works. It's important to point out that I'm talking to software engineers. This is targeted at software engineers, and this does not apply if you're a historian, something like that. We're incredibly privileged, and that's who I'm talking to when I say these things. Now, I personally don't remember what I wanted to be when I was little. People tell me I sang and I dance all the time. That doesn't really make sense with who I am today. Like, my voice is great for like nothing. And I dance like a drunken robot. And it's not a pretty sight. But I wanted to be a quantum physicist. And my parents, even though they encouraged me, they pointed out that it would be really difficult to explain to my grandparents what I was doing, right? Because my sister wanted to be a vet. And that would be easy. Like, I'm learning how to fix, you know, a broken dog paw. I wouldn't have it that easy, though. Today, I ended up studying informatics and computer engineering. I wanted to be a consultant in the beginning. I didn't really know what that meant. I don't really know what it means today. But I thought it involved wearing a suit, making a lot of money, and telling people what to do. And I was like, shit, that's exactly what I want to do with my life. Right? I mean, it doesn't sound too bad. I mean, things have a way of straying off path. And that brings us to Julio's principle 0, which is you should really not care what other people have to say about what you're doing with your life, because they have no clue. I mean, who are you going to listen to? I mean, if Steve Jobs were to approach me and tell me, look, Julio, here's what you could do better, I would sit and listen, right? But most people aren't successful. Most people aren't great. Most people are average by definition, right? So you should just ignore that and do whatever you please. Anyway, this happened to me. I'm not a consultant today. When I was at Philp, I got involved with many activities that great institution offered me. I got involved in Prash and freshman support, right? That was a lot of fun. I ran for a couple of years Núcleo de Informática. It was this group of computer people, students, right? And we built a lot of projects there. And I did a few paid software projects as well. I built a small conference managing tool for the faculty of something, psychology, I think. And I built quite a large platform for the faculty of architecture as well. And I ran a high-profile gossip news site called Motivators. And that was hosted in the faculty servers, right? And at its peak, it consumed 15% of all the faculty's bandwidth. I'm very proud of that. And everybody else who contributed to it. I forgot all about the suits. So this kind of ties in with Julio's principle number 1, which is don't plan a lot, because it's just not going to work. You're not going to, like, following through a plan that you set 10 years ago is going to be very, very difficult, because everything changes, and you should embrace change. You should be open to change. If you choose a path and you lock yourself to it, then if that doesn't work anymore, you're screwed. Nobody wants that. So, yeah. Anyway, at some point during my last year at Philp, I decided that I wanted to move to Copenhagen for whatever reason. And as part of my dissertation / master's thesis, I interned for half a year at the Fraunhofer Institute. I chose them for 2 reasons. They had the most interesting projects, but they also paid the most money. So paid internships were great back then. I have no idea how they are now. People tell me they're not good. But I was trying to save money to move, right? So that's what I did. And meanwhile, I've been applying to all sorts of companies. And I sent about 50 job applications. Because I had very little real-world experience, I got like 2 interviews. And the first company that I interviewed, they said yes, and they said yes immediately. I never had the second. So it was this company called Groovy, who I'm still with today. Actually, this weekend, we just raised more than 200,000 euros, so that's pretty cool. Yay, us. Thank you. Thank you. Anyway, we had a good conversation. The guys seemed cool. The project seemed cool. So they were not even a startup. They just had an idea. And they had a spot in Startup Bootcamp's first edition, which was in Copenhagen, 2010. So they said, look, you're going to have a lead developer working next to you. We're going to pay you $3,500 a month. And I was like, holy shit, that's more money than I've ever seen. Right? Turns out there was a little bit of a problem and a misunderstanding. So I would be paid a third of that, which is not good in Copenhagen. Like you go to a student bar and you get a cheap beer and you pay €5. It's not good. But I mean, I thought, look, I'm going to work for a startup, right? So that's what's going to happen. I'm going to be in that picture over there, right? I'm going to be just like those guys. I'm going to be a millionaire, and it doesn't really matter what my salary is, right? Well, it turns out it's not that easy. So this program was interesting and all, but I was a little bit shy and socially awkward, so I pretty much avoided all networking at all costs, which was a big mistake, because the handful of contacts that I managed to make proved to be very valuable in the future. If I could go back in time, I would change that. But anyway, by the end of the program, after 3 months, we had a decent MVP that nobody wanted. Nobody cared. We had good feedback from our users, but the people who we were trying to sell it to, they just couldn't care less. So we were developing a Facebook application, and we took our knowledge of developing for Facebook, which was a pain in the ass back then, and we took our knowledge of social mechanics and dynamics, and we pivoted a little bit. We decided to build tabs for Facebook pages, right? For movie companies. We did that. They bought it. We were in business. We didn't die. It was great. We kept making these for a little while, and that paid some of the bills, together with all the loans the founders had taken. Because we had zero investment at the time. They weren't paying themselves anything, like literally zero. They were pouring all the money into our salaries, which were, after a year, they were still quite small. Which was a problem because I had taken a liking to the best cocktail bar in the city. It's called Ruby. If you're in Copenhagen, check out Ruby. And I estimate that they kept at least half of my monthly salary every month for the first year. It has to be. It's impossible otherwise. Priorities. And that leads us to Julio's principle number 2. I became the only developer in the company, and this tab business wasn't really working out. It didn't provide enough revenue. So we started building all these different Facebook applications, like these one-off projects for creative agencies. And that started bringing in more money, which was great because I needed to renegotiate my contract. I mean, you know, it was getting ridiculous. So I had a very awkward 5-minute conversation with the founders, and that pretty much doubled my salary and quintupled my equity. So I want to show you my third principle, which is that you should negotiate everything. Because, I mean, I want you all to do this on Monday. Because the worst thing that can happen, right, is people tell you no. The best thing that can happen is that, well, you double your salary and you can quintuple your ownership, right? And that's pretty cool. So from that point on, the bar started to keep 3/4 of my salary. And that was fun. Anyway, so in early 2012, I moved to Berlin on the very last day of February. That wasn't good. Berlin's really cold. So I drove from Copenhagen, all our shit in a Ford Transit van, and I got to Berlin, and it was almost tropical, like minus 20 degrees. And that's not just, you know, a cold number that you think of. That's you get out of the house, and after 10 seconds, you've got stalactites forming in your nose. And you speak, and there's this background noise with a crackling of the ice in the beer that's not welcoming. But apart from the cold, I found Berlin to be a fascinating city. So I was living in this metropolis, right, which is enormous. And nobody judges you. Nobody passes judgment on you. And it's not because people are more tolerant. They are, but it's not because of that. It's because no one could give 2 shits about who you are, where you come from, what you do. Like if you decide to run naked in the streets, people just say, yeah, that guy's an artist, and they proceed to drink their cheap beer at 2 p.m. It's what people do. So I thought, I'm at home, right? Because I'm a weird guy, and I like to be in a place where I can be weird and nobody really questions that. So that was great. Anyway, shortly after arriving, I figured that I couldn't just rely on my girlfriend for social connections. And I started going to meetups. And oh my God, there were so many of them. So many meetups all over the place. And if you were a programmer, it was like having this badge of honor that conferred you immediate stardom, right? So I felt for the first time what it was like to be the hot guy in a room. And it's a great feeling. To all of you hot guys, cool, man, because you just stand there and people figure out you're a programmer, and suddenly you've got 20 people around you, all of them trying to hire you or date you or whatever. And that was fun. That was very fun. And in these meetups, I made a bunch of friends who, some of them are still my best friends to this day. So this was a good time. Yeah, so around this time, I had two friends, the first two people that came from Portugal to join me in Berlin. And that was great, because suddenly I had people from my home base and people from my new base, and we were all getting together. So one of them actually worked with me and still works with me on two of my current projects. So that's great. Which brings us to the next Julio's principle, which is, I don't really know how to translate it. I'm sure you all understand, though. Anyway, my time in Berlin saw me come up with a ton of failed projects. It was great. So I originally this was more than an hour because I just listed everything, but I didn't do that. But I made an application that would turn your feed subscriptions and turn that into a podcast so that you could listen to it. Well, what else is here? So I had this thing that looked in Facebook's social graph, found common tastes that you have in music and film between you and your friends, and read event feeds to then recommend, like, you should take Johnny out on Friday to see this film because you clearly both would be into it, and it's on at this cinema. There was a movie in the works about how my cooking would save the world as well. This is not really tech, but this was true. There was a script, there were actors. It just never happened. And sometime in early 2013, this was a project that it failed, but it went somewhere, and I'm quite happy with it. So somewhere in the beginning of 2013, me and my friends started organizing these events. We call them Peaks of Interest. And the idea was that this would be a forum in which you could come talk about something that you had an interest in, but you weren't an expert. So it was a very tolerant environment. I had to kickstart the whole thing. So I put together a presentation about something that was really, really piquing my interest at the time, which was artificial intelligence as an existential risk. So it's a fascinating topic. But I thought, I need an extra something. I need a gimmick for my presentation. So I put together this little application. And because that presentation was done using Prezi, you'll be proud of me. And I built this thing that I called Prezi Buddy. Yeah. And what you could do with that was, so the whole audience would connect to this URL that would display in a QR code, and people could upvote and downvote the presentation in real time. And they could leave comments in real time as well, and all of those would be timestamped and then mapped against the presentation timeline. It also, it had my presenter's notes, and it allowed me to send messages to the audience and all that. It was cool. And I had everybody use it because, well, everybody has smartphones. And what this does is it then generates this timeline of what's happening in your presentation. So you've got the upvotes in green, downvotes in red. The score is the average of the two, is the blue line. And then these areas, they kind of show high activity. And you see here that there were a ton of downvotes going on. So you want to find out why, you just look down in the comments. And the people were just saying, dude, I don't understand what you're saying now. You're going too fast, or you didn't explain that properly. And the idea of this is that you could improve on your presentations for the future, right? So people in the audience would be giving you feedback. And people like this a lot. So for the second edition of this Peaks of Interest thing, I kind of forced the 3 presenters to use the application as well in their presentations to gather more data. And it went so well that we actually tried to raise money for this as kind of an audience analytics tool. But we didn't, and we got bored of that, and we just moved on. But there was even a CMS where you could create these presentations, and you could create questions to ask the audience rather than just asking for a show of hands. And that was pretty cool. Well, meanwhile, right, I was working on my own company, and that allowed me to have some freedoms. At some point, I decided to go and live for a month in Brooklyn. And that was great, because I ended up partying for a whole weekend in DC. And I met the guy there that would later, 2 years after that, give me a fantastic contracting job. So this brings us to Julio's principle number 5, which is pretty much you need to party all the time, because you're going to meet people who may be instrumental for your future. The more people you meet, the more doors you open, the more you're able to do. So this is obviously an exaggeration, but I recommend a version of that. Anyway, by the end of the year, by the end of 2013, a friend from Copenhagen contacted me, and they wanted to build this marketplace. Like Etsy.com is for crafts, they wanted to do that for food and drinks. And the idea was that you could democratize the whole food production and distribution chains. Like there's this whole supermarket mafia, I don't know if you're aware of it, it's really dark, it sucks. And we wanted to kind of help people get away from that, get away from the monopoly deals. And even ideally, you would allow people from developing countries to sell their wares at European prices to the European markets. And we thought that would be an interesting project to do. So I said, yeah, absolutely. We have, this is actually not up yet. This is our next design version. The present one is horrible, so I didn't want to show it. But it's a growing marketplace. We're selling a lot, and we white labeled the platform as well. So there's a gigantic Danish conglomerate that is using what we built for the backbone of their sales. So we actually bootstrapped the the B2C market, which is what you're looking at, via B2B sales. I hate those two words. Via B2B sales. So we didn't need any funding, and that was a lot of fun. So I built the MVP, and I'm now the CTO of the company. And we're expanding to Portugal soon. Not really sure how, but we'll figure out a way. And that'll be fun. And Groovy was also doing great at this point. Like, we scored contracts with Warner Brothers, and we scored contracts with Disney. But a competitor emerged, and we sucked at dealing with that, so we kind of lost all of them. It was bad times. But anyway, so a little bit closer to the present. In July of last year, I moved again. So Copenhagen, Berlin, and now Google had contacted my girlfriend. They wanted her to join the team in Dublin. And she was excited, obviously. I didn't want to go, because Berlin. So they just started throwing money at us until we said yes. It was kind of the Godfather thing, like make you an offer you can't refuse, right? And yeah, there I am in Dublin now. I don't recommend it. Maybe for a weekend, but that's pretty much it. Groovy was terrible at this point. It got even worse. We went from 11 people to 3.5. So that wasn't good. So I needed another job or part. So I got a contracting job from this company in DC. They're called Mobility Labs, and they work with a lot of social utility foundations. So they work with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Linda and Arnold Johnson Foundation, for example. And this is the guy that I had met in DC in a party 2 years ago because of a Japanese-American dude that I had met in Copenhagen in 2010. Right? And I love how these things work. Like, I got this job with no interview, with no nothing. Like, I was just a guy that you can trust, and trust is priceless. Like, if you trust somebody, especially with, something like, I need you to build me a system for next week, and it needs to be built for next week. You need to trust that person. It doesn't really matter if they're the best Ruby programmer in the world. If they can't deliver, they can't deliver. And if you meet the right people and convey an idea of trust, of reliability, then you're set for life. So that's great. And like, you are your network. And building one is sometimes great, and other times a pain in the ass. It sucks to mingle at cocktail parties and all the industry events. I never know what to say. I end up just trying to get people to talk about themselves because everybody seems to love that. I mean, case in point. But it's always a little bit awkward, but it's something that you should really, really do. And that's not even the only way to network. There's other ways. Like SoundCloud this year, they're a startup in Berlin, and they made 2 of their biggest and best hires ever straight out of GitHub, because they were building this open source monitoring project called Prometheus. And they took 2 of the contributors that were contributing all the time. They were 2 kids. And I said, look, dude, do you want a job? I mean, you're really good at what you do. So to build a network, to build trust, you don't really need to go and do what everybody else does. There's alternative ways. And I really recommend that you do it. Because it's great that you have people that the first person they think of when they think of tech is you. So you've got people with great ideas, people with good established businesses as well. And the second they think, tech could help me, they think of you and they call you and they give you an opportunity. And I think that is very, very valuable. So anyway, this is pretty much where I am today. My philosophy is a little bit to keep trying. I think that hard work plays a much more important role in our fantasy than in reality. There's a very big luck element and a very big timing element, and we see failed ideas and failed products and failed companies all the time. So the more of those you follow, the bigger the chances that you'll succeed eventually. It was never my dream to become a great programmer at all. I don't have any career aspirations. Not that those are bad. I have a profound respect for people in both camps. But it's just really not my thing. I'm a mediocre programmer at best, from my understanding. But this doesn't stop me from getting weekly offers. Do you want to be my CTO? Do you want to be a senior developer here? Do you want to be a team lead? I'm contacted all the time, and the reason I believe is that a lot of people know me, and people look at my LinkedIn profile, and they look at my website, and they see that I'm involved in so many things. I have to have learned something, right? So I may not have the best GitHub profile, but I've got other skills, because here's what I think. You'll always need the genius programmer to figure out that one thing that nobody else can, right? But how often does that happen, right? I mean, most of the work is about relationships. It's not about code. I honestly think this. I think that if you're hiring a team, you hire people that you want to work with, not people who are geniuses but insufferable. And this happened to me in the past. And who wants to work with an asshole, right? Nobody does. But if you have to have 1 in 100, that may be enough. But it's just really my personal opinion here. And I think that being a software engineer is an incredible privilege these days. No matter what happens in our life, next week we have a high-paying job. So I personally think I would be an idiot if I didn't try new things, if I didn't try different stuff. Because worst come to worst, I pick up the phone and I've got a job next week. And the same is true for all of you who are software engineers. I'm nothing special, as I said before. I mean, every morning I go through the ritual of feeling like shit for 15 minutes when I look at Hacker News. I see what the top 1% in the world can do, and I think, I can't do any of that. But, I mean, it doesn't matter, because you don't need to be that guy to get a fantastic job. And so, I don't think that there's a better way. I have many good friends for whom working in a big company and working 9 to 5 is the best choice. And I absolutely don't judge that. I mean, I have no business questioning the life choices of other people. Predictability is something a lot of people value. And that is important. And it's important that there's offers for predictability. But the problem, what I have a problem with, is when people confuse predictability with safety. If you want to know where you're going to be in a year, if you want to make sure that you can pick up your kids from kindergarten every day at the same time, then by all means, go for a predictable job. There's great things that you have there, like community and skill development and support that you don't find being a freelancer or working for a smaller company. But if you do it for safety, if you do it for the reason that you think, oh shit, if I stop working for a year, I'm never going to get another job or whatever, that's all false. Those are illusions that people put in your heads. And we have the best safety net of all time. I think it'd be crazy not to be crazy in these things, because we can always get a job next week. And I'm going around in circles here, but I think it's a really important point. And that brings us to, I think that's the last principle. I think that's incredibly true. And I think that's the biggest message that I want to convey. For whoever wants to do different things, don't not do them because you think it's going to screw your life. That's not true. Anyway, to wrap this up, and given the scope of the conference, I'd like to offer my perspective in a question, which is, people talk about Porto as a tech hub, and there was a whole panel here yesterday discussing like what could be done. Well, why is Porto not a tech hub? I mean, we've got a lot of amazing things going for Porto. We've got great climate, great people, welcoming people, fantastic gastronomy, literally the best in the world. We have an international reputation for the best travel destination in many, many places. But all of these also make a place a good place to make a living. So why is it that what's missing here, right? We have good infrastructure, we have good talents pouring in from our many universities and institutes, but we lack support for entrepreneurship. We lack a lot of that. Like in Germany, if you know how to write a business plan, you write a business plan and you get public funding with no initial investment on your part. If you have a solid idea, this is something that you have access to. Maybe it exists in Portugal as well. I have no knowledge of this. I would love to see more public funding in this area, to be honest. And the local bureaucracies, they should be going the extra mile to attract private funding, both national and international funding for what we have here in Porto. Why is Dublin a tech hub? Dublin is a shithole, right? Why is Dublin a tech hub? It's because of tax breaks, right? So they offered tax relief for companies, and now you've got Google and Amazon and Oracle and Facebook, and everybody has got offices in Dublin. And Dublin has a very vibrant tech scene. It's really good. It's nothing compared to Porto, and that is because you have all these companies with thousands and thousands of employees that need to hang out. So these things happen when you foster them. We also need to develop a feeling of community. A tech scene doesn't emerge out of nowhere. It emerges out of events like this one, and it emerges out of grassroots events like meetups, for example. And a truly committed local government should be helping these meetups to happen and these events to happen by offering an easily accessible sponsorship program for them, because it's something that we should be fostering, and I'm preaching to the choir here. More co-working spaces wouldn't hurt either. Unicorn jobs. Big companies like Blip, like Farfetch, and like Critical, they could be offering jobs for mere maintenance and building in open source. They could hire people, both national and abroad, and that would be a fantastic way of attracting talent. Look, all you have to do is write this gem. That's it. Have fun. That brings a lot of attention. That brings a lot of people and a lot of reputation. And if you have the money to do it, then you should be doing it, in my opinion. And final thing, it's hard for companies here to compete on salaries. And that will continue to be the case for many, many years, but that's okay. Because, that's not my bottle. Because money isn't everything. Money is only part of the deal. And Porto is a fantastic city with a very, very big quality of life, and there's a lot of advantages to working here. We don't have the crazy burnout-inducing work culture that's endemic to the US, for example. We don't have any of that. We should be playing our home field. We should be taking what we have and selling those as perks. If we can afford to pay low salaries, then give people a 25-hour work week. Give people a day off. Offer people freedom of location. There's also something else, which is, I'll get back to that, but it's socially acceptable to drink beer at lunch here. This is enormous. You can't, unless you work in a small startup, if you work for Siemens in Germany, you have a beer at lunch, you're gonna get fired. It's just not acceptable. We're cool, we're relaxed, we're fine with that, and this should be sold. Now, Silicon Valley is just ridiculous, right? So I'm gonna show you, this is a picture of a new hire for a company called Scopely. Now, Scopely offers new hires a few things. So they offer a suitcase with $11,000 in cash. That's a harpoon gun. That's an oil painting of the dude. And there's other things like a year's supply of beer and whatnot. We can't compete with this, but that's okay, because who cares? Who chooses a job over the other because of this? All else being equal, fine. I would love that. That's a custom-made tuxedo. Okay, I wouldn't mind, but that's not a reason to pick a job. Given that the cost of services here is so low compared to other places in Europe, and especially the US, then why aren't we offering free babysitting care, for example? Why aren't we offering private medical insurance? Because we can, and we're not doing it. And those are things that we can do to improve our retention and to improve the chances of having more people join us without having to break the bank. PlayStations in the lobby are fun, but that's not the reason people come back to work every day, or I would hope. Just one more thing. There's also something else that we should be collectively invested in. The Portuguese culture is still very much risk-averse. Failure is a badge of dishonor and a badge of shame. For me, failure means that somebody tried, and unless they're really stupid, they certainly learned something from it. And this is not the perception that I think that is endemic to the Portuguese culture, and that should change if we want to encourage entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship is all about embracing failure and about failing 10 times and getting it right the next one. So yeah, well, this was mostly a storytelling exercise, but that's it. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot. And thank you very, very much for your time and for your patience in being here. It's probably longer than half an hour. I have no idea. But thank you all very much. And that's